Providing insights to help you grow your business, improve yourself, and add value to those around you. You're listening to the Success is a Choice podcast, where you get a peek into the lives of industry leaders as they share their stories with you.
Everybody, welcome to the Success is a Choice podcast. I appreciate you joining us. We'll get right to our guest in just a moment, but I want to first remind you that today's episode is brought to you by freeleadershipworkshop.com, freeleadershipworkshop.com. Every week we go over another topic, a different topic that can help your organization, business, or team have a better culture, have better teammates. So freeleadershipworkshop.com, freeleadershipworkshop.com. Today's guest, I'm very happy to have today Pete Parada. He is longtime drummer, I believe 14 years with the Offspring. He's been drumming his whole life, been with lots of bands. Now he's with the band that he co-founded, the band the Defiant, with guys like the lead singer of the Mighty Mighty Bosstones and the guy who wrote most of the songs for Smash Mouth. But we have Pete Parada on the show today. So Pete, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jamie. Great to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, for those of us that are coaches or athletic people, we like listening to music. Kind of take us behind the scenes about, when you're in a band, we see the front man singing, we hear the beat going. That's the drummer. The drummer is keeping the beat. So I'm thinking from a leadership perspective, you're the guy that's not always seen up front, but man, you're the guy that's keeping that song going.
Yeah, I mean, the drummer's got to be in charge. That's the thing a lot of people don't realize, I think, is yes, we're in the back and it appears more of like a support position. But if I'm not running the show, then it's going to be a mess. When you're on stage, and it's the drummer's job not just to obviously have good timing and move the music forward, but we feel the tempo of the show, and we feel out the crowd and feel how it's going. How much space do we need between the songs? How do we keep the transitions going? How do we keep the flow going? And sometimes, depending on the band you're in, how do I wrangle the bass player who's behind the beat back forward while also pulling the guitar player who's ahead of the beat back? And, you're not just juggling with your sticks and your limbs, also your brain is juggling, however many other people are on stage. It's my job to make sure that everyone is comfortable, make sure everyone knows what's going on and where we're going next. So it's sort of like you're the director of a movie from the drum riser, making sure everything goes. My eye, especially, if you're a band, you're playing a festival or you're opening for another band, you have a very specific amount of time that your band gets to be on stage. So my eye is on the clock. How much time do we have? We need to move into this next song. Like, I always know how much, there's 3 songs left in the set. I know these 3 songs go for 11 and a half minutes. So I need to make sure that we're going to hit that benchmark when we start, otherwise we're going to run out of time. We're going to have to cut a song. Like it can be a real mess. So there's a lot going on back there besides just, I like to say a lot of people don't realize, a good drummer, but they'll know something's off if it's not there. Like a good drummer can make a good band great, and a rough drummer can take a great band down. So it really makes a difference who you have back there. And it's much more than we get the typical stereotype of Neanderthals who hit things, but we have a million different balls we're keeping in the air throughout a show, and it's a lot, but it's fun. It's fun for sure. But I think most people don't understand how much goes into it. They're just like, oh, and then there's the drummer in the back doing whatever he does. And it's like, oh, cool. Just running the whole show. Yeah, that's whatever.
But I feel like we all want to be the drummer for some reason. I mean, I know we all play the air guitar very well, but we all just drum along when we hear almost any song, we're just drumming along.
I always see people. I mean, I say the most used drum set in the world is the steering wheel, because I'll see everybody at the red light banging on the steering wheel. Like, music propels us through our day. You know, when people say like, oh, well, music doesn't have any value. It's like, oh, do you never listen to it? Does it not get you going in the morning? Does it not affect you? Do you not revisit your favorite album when you're in an emotional state and you need something? Like, there's so much more value there than I think it kind of gets taken for granted in this day and age where, since Napster and things, and we've moved into streaming, music is largely free to everyone. And so, when something is presented like, well, I have every song in the world in my pocket, I can do whatever I want, it doesn't have that value anymore. Like, when I was a kid and my favorite band had a new record coming out, like, I had my money saved up. I was at the store that day. Like, I was pouring through the liner notes, looking over the artwork, like taking in the whole experience. And now it's like, you drop a whole record and somebody's like, I like the one song. It feels like kind of a loss there, that we don't have that connection to the music anymore. That, like, I look at my kids and they're like, yeah, I like one song by this person and one song by that person. And I was like, man, when I was a kid, I was living and dying by every song on the record, and just like poring over the words. What are they trying to say? What am I not picking up on here? Like, it feels like a different experience now in this age where our attention spans are so divided and shrunk down, that we don't kind of get the same return out of the music anymore, even though the music hasn't changed, but the way that we receive it has. And that's been kind of an interesting thing to navigate.
Well, you sound like such a boomer, back in my day.
I know. Kind of when I was walking to school uphill in the snow both ways.
That's right. Well, I whistle. There's a song from Weezer I'm always whistling, or even like singing around the house, and my wife will just laugh at me because nobody knows the song. It's not one of Weezer's favorite songs, or a song that people know.
Yeah.
But it's the song that I like, one of the best of their songs, and you would never get that today, because it's all individual songs on iTunes or Apple, and you're only listening to the hits. You're not listening to all, sometimes those songs that aren't released, I imagine, and you know this obviously better than I do, but some of those songs are more creative, or you like them better probably.
Yeah, for sure. The deep cuts are where the real artistry is, because, you've got your songs that you craft towards hopefully getting on the radio or getting some airplay or getting in front of people. But I think for most artists, while record label will put a lot of pressure on you to have those songs, a lot of artists really like the deep cuts better, where they can get weird, where they can express themselves, where it's like, well, this song is for me, and it's never going to be released as a single, but it's on there. And I again, a boomer me misses the days of when people would dig for those, like you said, like, oh, my favorite song from that band is the one that no one listens to, but that's the one that grabbed me. And that's how I was as a kid. Like, you kind of, you're like, oh yeah, that's their radio song anyway, but the rest of the record's good, that kind of thing. Especially in the 80s and early 90s, rock and roll was just, music in general is chasing trends. But, when Motley Crue did their big ballad in 84, 85, and then every band had to put a ballad on their record, hoping to get that on the radio. And it was just this formula of like, all right, well, you got your pop song, but then you followed up with that rock song, but then you hit them with that ballad. It was just this cycle over and over and over. And now it's just shrunk down to, you get one shot at this. What's your song?
When you're lucky if it's even a real song and not AI, or just, hey, press a button. It reminds me of back in the day when those Casio synthesizers came out, and you just hit one button and it'd play this like drum track or something. But
the demo song.
It feels like everybody's so fake nowadays.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, because I think it's leveled the playing field where everyone gets to be creative now, and everybody can express themselves, and everyone has a recording studio in their pocket, really, compared to when I was a kid. Again, boomer. But, if someone within 100 miles of you had a 4-track cassette recorder, like, oh, we're going to make a record, right? It's going to sound awful and terrible, and you're going to have to combine tracks and bounce stuff down. And now it's just like unlimited tracks and auto tune and, time correct, and everything can just be perfected within an inch of its life. And now you got AI, where it's just like, write me a song that sounds like Green Day with lyrics like Weezer, and the singer sounds like, David Bowie or whatever. And then it just, it shoots you out a song in like 10 seconds. It's insane. So
it is. And so So when you're driving down the road in your car or whatever, are there some bands that you like to listen to? And when you listen to them, I shouldn't ask you a two-part question as a interviewer, but when you do listen to them, are you just appreciating the song? You just like the song, or do you actually listen to the drummer and try to go that deep, or do you just get away and say, hey, this is just an entertaining, enjoyable song?
Yeah, when I was a kid, entertaining, enjoyable song. I didn't know how the sausage was made. I wasn't listening to pick apart different things. Like, yeah, I would listen to the drums and I could tell, some bands I liked the drummer better than others. I thought they were more creative and whatnot. And then once I started making records and recording, then my ear was tuned to the drums. So then every time I listen to something, I'm listening to the drums first. And now that I do more songwriting, composing, producing, now I'm trained my ear back to taking in everything as a whole. And I can hone in on the drums or I can hone in on the bass, but it's not, I try to listen to the song as a whole now and not get too caught up in one particular aspect of it, which is hard. When your focus is one instrument, you can get kind of stuck in that mode of like, that's all I pay attention to. And then, you're missing the bigger picture sometimes. So it's been nice to pull back a little bit more and see music as a whole instead of just focusing on the drums so much.
Well, I am a meathead athletic jock type person. I'm not a music guy like you, but I watched a documentary a couple of years ago about drumming, and they were talking about Led Zeppelin's drummer, John Paul Jones.
John Bonham. Yeah.
John Bonham. Wow.
Yep.
John Bonham.
Mm-hmm.
And I never knew this about him or about drumming, but a lot of times he would be, like you talked about earlier, like keeping the band on beat and keeping them going. It seemed like he was very like offbeat. His drumming was very different, not like a traditional type drummer. And so when I listen to Led Zeppelin songs, I'll start to listen to that. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense because when you try to drum along on your steering wheel, like you say, it's hard to drum along to a Led Zeppelin song.
Yeah, the cool thing about that music was, they weren't using metronomes. They weren't playing along to a click track. Like the songs, they ebb and they flow, and not drastically to where you're like, oh, wow, he's rushing there. But that's how music used to be. Like you get to the chorus and you push a little bit, you create that excitement. You get back to the verse and you pull back a little bit. And nowadays, everything just gets slapped on a grid in the computer and you pick your tempo and now we're going to stay there. And that's where our ears are trained for now. But when you go back and you listen to that stuff, you can hunt down on YouTube. There's videos where they've isolated his drum tracks from the rest of the album. And it's incredible because you just hear, you can feel what he's going for. And also you can hear like grunts and groans and where he's adding emphasis himself that gets drowned out when the guitars and the vocals and everything get added to the music. But when you hear it by itself, it's just like this real guttural, organic sort of thing. And he was an interesting drummer too, because he would set up and play right-handed, but when he would go a lot of his fills, he would lead with his left hand, which for me is a bit, I just didn't grow up playing that way. I'm right-handed. I lead with my right hand. So a lot of the stuff, like it's been hard to figure out like, wow, how's he doing that? What's he doing there? Well, he's leading with his other hand. So you're, once you figure that out, then it's like, wow, that's why a big reason why he stood out so much, but mostly for his incredible feel. Like he had a swing to his playing and he was just bombastic. There hasn't been anybody like him, and that he got cut short so young. It's always so sad to wonder like, oh, what would he be playing like now? What did we miss out on? What did we never get? Like that kind of stuff is where your heart breaks, because you lose the artist and then the artistry goes with them. And, there's never been another one like him. Many people, we all try, but nobody has that Bonham feel. Like he just had all these different elements, especially at that time, that made him so special.
Well, other than like Bonham with that feel that he would have with Led Zeppelin songs, is there a song you played at a high level? I mean, you played at the highest level a drummer can play, big time hits. Is there a song that you just to this day just struggle to play? Like you can't copy? What would be a song that you really struggle? You just can't get it.
I mean, take anything from the Police. Like I don't have a real good reggae background, and that like Stuart Copeland's style was, again, here's this guy out of nowhere combining styles that don't belong in rock, but somehow he's making it work. Like, I know tons of guys that came up on that stuff. It just wasn't on my radar when I was learning drums. So like all the cross sticking and the reggae stuff, like I don't naturally have that. So I always go back to it and I keep working on it, but it never quite feels authentic coming out of my body versus, you watch videos of Copeland play and it's just like effortless butter, just smooth. So yeah, stuff like that. I admire the hell out of it. And it's just like, I don't play like that. That's not for me, but that's his thing. And I think as drummers or any creative, you can get caught up and bogged down with comparing yourself to somebody else and feeling like, oh, well, they play like this, I've got to do that. And then you lose yourself in the process. And to me, it's more interesting when somebody digs a little deeper and finds their own thing and plays outside of the box. And I've had some great teachers and mentors over the years who have been really good about, if I start veering too far over here, to be like, hey, remember who you are, remember where you came from, find your voice here. Don't just, try to recreate what somebody else did or put a little twist on it. Like, add that to your personality and see what comes out, and I think that's what makes all of us interesting. You put me in the Police, it's not going to sound like that. It's going to be heavier. It's going to be, it won't be good because it's just the wrong mixture of styles. But I think everybody has a spot where they shine, and that's the goal, is to try to find that. And you get in a situation and go, all right, well, my job here, I'm the drummer. I need to make this band better. I need to lift up the song. I need to move things forward. I need to get people up out of their seats and moving their body. You want people to have a good time. When people start dancing, it's usually an involuntary response. Like, nobody goes, I'm going to dance now. It's like, I mean, you can do that, but it's very awkward robot, right? But if somebody genuinely is having a reaction to the music, like, that's visceral, then that's exciting. I took my youngest daughter years ago. She was a real big heavy metal fan when she was younger because I was listening to heavy metal. So she was like, oh yeah, well, my favorite band is Slayer. So I took her to see Slayer on their farewell tour, and this band Lamb of God was playing right before them. And we're in our seats in the arena and whatever, and Lamb of God comes on, and she's probably like 9 or 10 at the time, and she just stands up out of her seat and just starts moving. And I was like, oh wow, this is just really grabbing her. My introverted kid in the middle of 20,000 people is like, I must move now. Like, I've got to get into this. And it was wild to see. I was just sitting there smiling, watching the whole thing, because she was just in it, like, so pumped. And I'm like, I love that natural reaction where we can get out of our heads, we can get out of our bodies for a while and just react to something and let it, seep into our bodies and make us move. And I think that's such an important thing. Live music is such an important thing. And so the more that we can witness it when it's actually real and live, and you're not just watching lip syncing and a backing track on a video screen, that's great.
Well, proud dad moment there. Dad of the year, getting excited about his 9-year-old daughter going crazy at a Slayer Lamb of God heavy metal concert.
Yeah, it was great.
Proud dad moment.
For sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. So when you're playing songs, I gotta think that there's songs that you just hate, or after a while you just hate playing them. Does that ever get to be the case? Or as a drummer, you just love the fact that you're beating on a drum, beating on the pots and pans and going at it?
That's a good question. Here's my approach to that all the time is, even if you're in a band, like I was in Offspring 14 years, right? So you're playing 90% of the sets that we played were the same. Like, they had a lot of hits. We had to cram all these songs in. So you are playing, there was not a show I ever played where we didn't play Pretty Fly for a White Guy, right? But while it might be my 1000th time playing that song, it's somebody else's first time seeing that song being played. And so I always strove to get out of my own head and make sure that the person who's witnessing it for the first time sees me playing it like it's the first time. And that, I think that helps combat any kind of fatigue or boredom or monotony that sets in is like, okay, this isn't about me. I didn't buy a ticket to be here. These people bought a ticket to be here. So they deserve the best of what I have. And, so that's always something that carried me through, even on those days where you're sick or you're tired or banged up and everything hurts. And it's just like, well, get through it because somebody worked really hard to buy this ticket and be here, and they deserve the best show that you can get. So I try to stay in that kind of mindset to avoid, falling into those traps of monotony. And I know guys that fall in that trap and then they're miserable and they just, it feels like a desk job. And none of us got into this business to do a desk job. We got into this for excitement. We got into this for self-expression. And so I think it's important to not lose sight of that and hold on to it, to keep from burning out.
So where did you mentioned, your own style, where did you come up with your style of drumming, and what, who were your influences, or walk us through kind of, because you've done punk, you've done, rock, now the band, the Defiant, it's all over the board, but
Yeah.
but a lot of, there's ska influence, all different kinds. Where did you get your style?
My style, I kind of like everybody else, you got to start somewhere. So you start by ripping off everyone that you're into. So for me growing up, it was a lot of Metallica. I loved Tommy Lee with Motley Crue. My favorite drummer was this guy named Scott Rockenfield, was in a band called Queensryche that was like a prog rock band in the late 80s from Seattle. And I always found him to be super creative, in the same way that I liked Neil Peart from Rush, very, very creative, always pushing the envelope. But my biggest influence was a guy from my hometown. I grew up in a little town in upstate New York, and my dad taught at the next town over at the bigger school. And I got dragged out to, my friend of mine dragged me out to see this local band one night when I was in high school. And I had always had this mental block. I don't know why. I don't know if it was like small town syndrome or low self-esteem, whatever. But it was like I'd watch people on MTV and go, oh my God, that's awesome. I could never do that. Like just had this disconnect of like, I can't play like that. Those guys are, from another planet. And I go to see the show, and here's this kid that's like a year older than me playing exactly like everybody on TV. And that was it. It was like whatever was not connected that night. And I went home the next day and just started practicing. It was like, if he can do it, I can do it. And it that one night changed my entire life. And I went home and I start practicing, and I talked to my dad. I'm like, hey, do you have a drummer in your high school band named Mick Palmisano? And he's like, yeah, he's a really talented drummer. I'm like, you've never mentioned him to me before. My dad was pretty blunt, and he was just like, oh, well, Mickey's really serious about drums and you're not. So, and I was like, ouch,
Okay.
But okay, fair. And, so Mick at that point, just, I turned into a sponge. Like I would go and see him play. I would soak up everything he did. We got to be very good friends. We moved to LA together, went to music school together, and he was still the biggest influence on my drumming of anyone ever. Because he cared and he kept an eye on me and would watch, because he knew I was just copying everything he did. And finally one day, like, he didn't get mad about it. He didn't get frustrated about it, but he just said, I think you've plateaued to where you're doing what I'm doing, but I want to see what you can do. Like, so once again, he flipped a switch in my head that was like overnight. Oh, I'm not Mick, I'm myself. Let me find my own voice. And, always pushed me to move forward and push to be better, because he was the most creative drummer I've ever seen. Like, no matter what band he was in, he never played the typical thing that you would hear. He never did the obvious. He always went outside the box. And I've never forgotten that, because I loved watching him play. And so someone like Mick was my hugest influence. And then when I was in music school, I met a guy named Rioux, he played with David Lee Roth now, and the Stone Temple Pilots brothers, and he's been the drummer for Korn since 2007. He's phenomenal. And but we met, way back in the 90s. So when I graduated school, then I lived with Ray for about 3 years, and then he started kicking me down gigs that he was too busy for. And and we're still really good friends to this day. I moved to Tennessee, and like a year later, he's like, hey, how's Tennessee? We're thinking of coming. Now he lives 10 minutes from me here. So it's nice to have those connections from 30 years ago still nearby. The people that I care about and the people I look up to and who helped shape me, it's nice to have him here locally.
Well, you got a little bit of press a few weeks ago. You went on the Try That in a Small Town podcast, and you responded. You had some comments. You responded to your former band members in Offspring when they were on the Bert Kreischer show, but about your ending with the Offspring, and we talked a little bit about punk or just when people think about punk music, or they think about a lot of bands, they think about not complying or not going, stick it to the man type stuff. Hey, we're free spirits and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of our audience probably is not familiar with how you ended your time with the Offspring and what's happened since then. But talk a little bit about why you left the Offspring and the comments just of the punk music.
Yeah, I mean, COVID was a wild time, especially for the music industry. We send everybody home and said, don't go outside and bombard them with fear for the better part of a year. And then 2021 rolls around and it's like, well, we'd all like to get back to work, but now we've told everyone that crowds are unsafe. How do we get everyone to come back? And so the industry at large decided on that the COVID vaccines were going to save everything and fix everything. And I've told this story many times before, so I'll keep it brief here, but it the mandate started rolling through that summer and came to a head for me and the band because I have a history of Guillain-Barré syndrome that I've, traced back to childhood to vaccine reactions. So I was not excited about the idea of these vaccines. At first I was open to it because I'm like, well, this is new technology. Maybe this will be better. Maybe my body will have a better shot with this one. And then, we start looking at the data, my wife and I, and the people in the trials, no one had any autoimmune conditions. No one had any, it was all just the healthy people in the trials. So I'm like, all right, well, they haven't even tested this on anybody that has a history of bad reactions to this. I'm going to hang back and wait and see. And in the waiting, we learned a lot. And, things came to a head in that summer of 21 where, their manager came at me really, really hard, like a flamethrower, and tried to kind of belittle and bully me into getting this because, they wanted to go out as the fully vaccinated tour. And, even with a medical exemption, it didn't matter. It wasn't accepted. It was just, it was do this or get out. And so that was the end of my run with the band, which was really difficult because I tried to have conversations of like, hey, here's where I'm coming from. Here are my concerns. And they were all dismissed. And, we're not going to talk about that. Like, are you going to do this? If not, we're going to get someone who will. And so, that was kind of how that whole thing came to an end very, very rapidly, which was tough to have the rug pulled out from under you, especially after you've already been basically out of work for a year and a half. I wanted to get back to work as much as anybody else, but it wasn't, there was not an option for me to be there if I wouldn't do this thing. So that's kind of how all of that came to an end.
And it just seems ironic, and then lately with the comments about, just the idea of what they were as a band, what you were as a band and the Offspring, and we've seen this with a lot of other people. I think of Neil Young, back in the day. Neil Young, he was protesting government and protesting, don't make us do things, and we need to live free. And then, he's essentially a corporate shill.
Yeah, well, and I absolutely, and I'm kind of looking sideways at the whole punk scene, going, all right, you guys are all on board with this. You're all mandating, you're all pushing it. And then so that you can get back on tour, to get back on stage and sing songs about, pushing back against authority and, screw the man. And so now I'm like, all right, well, do you still sing that song with a straight face? And did you ever mean those lyrics in the first place? Or was it a fashion statement that was easy to wear through the 90s and the 2000s? It was like, yeah, we're so anti-authority, we're so punk. And then it was just like, no, everyone's got to do this thing. And if you won't do it, you can get the hell out. And it's like, well, that's not, that's conformity. That's not anti anything. So yeah, to see their comments on Bert's podcast about, when he asked them what to define punk rock, and for them to say like, oh, well, yeah, it's being hard and aggressive and anti-authority. And when someone tells you you've got to do this thing, you say, well, why should I have to do that? It's just like, seriously, that's where we're at now. Cause that's not that's the complete opposite of 3.5 years ago. So it was, you know, disheartening to see that, to say the least, and a little bit shocking that that's the, like I said on the Try That podcast, I don't know if it's rewriting history. I don't know if it's just compartmentalizing, or if it's just, well, we're the people in the power position. We get to set the rules, and you'll do as we want, or we'll get somebody else. And since we're in the power position, anything we do is justified, and we'll justify it any way we want. But or a complete break with reality. Who knows? Who's to say? But it was it's been wild to watch the rock and roll in general, not just punk rock, but like you said, Neil Young, everybody else just going to this thing of everyone has to do this, and everyone has to conform, and everyone has to comply. And I'm just like, when did rock and roll get turned on its head? Like, I know people have been saying rock is dead forever, but it was a really sad experience, not just to watch, but to live through. When you dedicated your life to this art form and this music that meant something to you, and for everyone else to go, now we feel the other way, but we're still going to sing those songs. But, obviously we don't mean any of it.
Well, from a fame and a financial standpoint, yeah, would be great to be in a band like Offspring, but that's then allowed you to do other things. And I got turned on to one of your newer endeavors with the Defiant, listening to you and them on Timcast, Tim Pool's show, and got introduced to them. And I went and downloaded the whole album on Apple, but because most of the songs are different, there's different styles to the different songs. And so I definitely I've recommended to a lot of people, the Defiant. I think it's a great album.
Thank you. I'm really proud of that record. Like, I love the diversity in the music. I love that all 5 of us come from very different backgrounds. And I love, for me, that there's nothing in the drumming on there that rehashes things that have done before, things that I've known for. And, outside of a lot of stuff on there is outside of my comfort zone beforehand, like the ska song on there. I've never played a ska song in my life, but it was like, all right, well, let me put my twist on what I think a ska song should be. Let me put my twist on what I think like a pop shuffle is. And, it was really fun to, I have my own studio here. That's where I'm recording this. And so we did all the drums and the vocals here at my place. And it was fun to have that freedom to play what I wanted to play and make it feel, new and exciting and different again. Like, when we started recording these songs, we thought we were just making demos, right? So a lot of the drumming on this album was first takes, first thoughts, first instinct, very, very, very much instinct and spontaneity. And I didn't overthink it, because I was like, oh, it's just a demo, we'll get the idea down. But as the songs started coming together and we start talking, it's like, all right, well, do you want to recut any of these drums? And I'm listening to it and going, wouldn't change anything. All I would do is record the same parts more self-consciously, and it would lose that energy and the organic rawness to it. So I love that we were just like, no, let's keep those drums and keep going. It was nice not to overthink things, especially in the age with computers and the new way that music is made now. I think everyone gets obsessed with perfection, auto-tuning every vocal within an inch of its life, time correcting every beat and every note, and until it's, all the life has been beaten out of it. You talk about Led Zeppelin, the reason those songs are still amazing, and because they feel like something. It's human, it's people working together, it's people listening. And modern music is very individual, very isolated. Like, well, I did my parts and I sent it to him and he added his parts. And there's a loss there to not all be in the same room together. And, that's kind of how this record was made, but it still had spontaneity to it, because nobody overthought anything. And we didn't have some Uber producer sitting there going, well, what if, or that's not right, or I don't like that, or, do something more traditional. It was, everybody had more room to stretch out and, have fun with it. And I think that comes across on the record, which is hard to capture anymore, where there's some spontaneity and there's some real organic feeling of energy in there. So it's a really, I love that record. Like, it always makes me smile, and I love talking to people about it, because a lot of people have the same reaction. Like, this album feels like music used to feel. Like, it feels like real people really playing, and it's not overly perfected, and we didn't mix it with a shiny sheen on it. It was, even that was probably the most tension of the whole thing, was arguing over, like, no, it needs to be more raw. No, like, it's over compressed. No, let it breathe. And, obviously I think creative tension is great. I think there's people get caught up in thinking that all tension is bad. And it's not when you're creating something. Look at the Rolling Stones. Like, Mick and Keith probably hate each other, but when they create something, that helps you push. I've been in situations before where nobody wants to speak up, and it's just like, yeah, that sounds great. Okay. But in your mind, you're like, man, I'd really think that section could be better, or we could have pushed farther there. And then you live with regret. But I think if you've got creative tension, that's good. If you've got drama, that's a different thing. If you've got personal differences and someone being obnoxious all the time and you don't want to be around them, then that's different. But when you're creating, I think it's good to have a little conflict, a little push and pull, because the results end up being better.
Well, I've seen some documentaries or some clips about Metallica and some of their, we'll call them creative differences, and revolving around the drummer, Lars, at different times. But you're right. And sometimes good stuff can come out of that. Sometimes it can leave people leaving the room pretty mad.
Yeah, sometimes you get sane anger. So, And I love Metallica. Just that record is tough to take. But it was that movie is fascinating, because you're watching these people like really open themselves up to how difficult it can be. And I think it's a really good microcosm of showing what happens when a band, like a street level band, becomes so wealthy and so successful. And then it's like, well, how do you get that edge back? How do you even get the pull to write when you don't need to? And that's where it's hard, when you create from a place of that you have to instead of that you need to. Then that's sometimes you get those records that are duds, and you're trying to find your way back. And so it was cool of them to show the process, and warts and all, for sure. It was fascinating. I love that movie.
Yeah, and it's probably, honestly, it's a difficult thing. You almost have an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other sometimes, in terms of, well, we know this formula. Here's the formula. This will work, and this will make us a lot more money. But then maybe over here, it's like, well, I don't want to keep doing this formula. I want to, let's do the creative stuff, not what, all these people want.
Well, that's the tough thing, especially in punk rock and rock in general. You're in a bind, because you can make the same basically sounding record like 2 or 3 times, and then everybody gets to their 4th album, and that's when things start to go a little squirrely, because you're like, well, I want to stretch my creative wings. And so now you're in a place where if you make something too similar to what you already did, then people go, well, that just sounds like the last record. But then if you stretch out and try something new, it's like, well, that doesn't sound like their old material. And so you kind of can't win. And so as an artist, I think it's important to be like, all right, well, what do I need? And you take the results out of it. You go, when I make this record, am I happy with it? Cool. Once it's out in the world, I don't have any control over how anyone feels about the music. I don't have any control over how anyone feels about me personally. I've had some amazingly horrible things said about me online in the last few years. And I'm just like, that's not even remotely close to accurate, but I don't get to tell you how to receive me. Like, have your own experience. That's cool. I'm not going to spend any time here worried that some stranger misunderstands me. Like, I can't spend all day correcting everybody, running around putting out fires, and it's the same thing musically. Like, if you are happy with your record and you achieved what you wanted with it, then that's already a success. Anything beyond that that's a different conversation. That's a different realm. But it is hard to walk that line of like, all right, well, I want to push forward creatively, but I also want to bring my audience along for the ride. And I think where things go wrong is where people lean too far one way or the other. If you lean too far towards catering to the audience, then your music gets repetitive. If you jump too far ahead without them, now you've lost your audience. And so it's really difficult and a real small needle to thread to find that way of how do we bring people along while also being inspired ourselves. And I think fans in general would rather that the artist be happy. Like if you're having a good time on stage, the crowd can have a good time on stage. If you're miserable up there, no one's having a good time. So the audience wants you to enjoy what you're doing, but they don't want, Jazz Odyssey. So, try to split the difference a little bit if you can, right?
No, I want to see you having fun, breaking sticks, twirling sticks, throwing water on people.
Yeah.
Going crazy. Now, you, as a rocker, you should have been. I mean, you're too calm this whole interview. You're totally destroying the stereotype of what a rocker should be.
Well, drummers in general, we're all pretty mellow because we get all our aggression out, right? So if you go see anybody on stage, they look like they're lighting their hair on fire. You get off stage, like we're introverts. Like I'm a quiet person. I'm not looking for a lot of interaction. But when I get on stage, I get to be somebody else. I get to be this version of me that's expressing what I can't express in words, I can express in music. And I think that's the beauty of music, is we get to take a piece of ourselves that we might not be comfortable with in the general population, but we can present it here. We can bring it here. So a lot of drummers that you think would be, oh man, that guy's a madman. Yeah, there's John Bonham, there's Keith Moon. I think the rest of us have kind of learned from that. Like, didn't end well for either of those guys, which is tragic. And still to this day, such a loss of what we never got. But I think drummers in general, we keep it pretty chill because we have to. There's certainly guys out there that were still doing that stuff. Tommy Lee was a crazy man, all through the 80s and 90s for sure. But, I can't, my little body can't take it.
Well, he's Pete Parada. Follow him on X, on Instagram at Pete Parada. Check out the Defiant, his band that he helped co-found. I think you'll like some of that stuff. You'll hear some of the influences, maybe from the Mighty Mighty Bosstones, Smash Mouth, some different things like that. You'll probably pick up on some of that stuff as well. But Pete Parada, appreciate you jumping on the call, jumping on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Had a great time. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And for everyone else, thank you for tuning in, watching this on Rumble, watching this on YouTube, listening to it on your favorite audio platform. Appreciate it. Share this with a friend. And until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?